Let's face it, when was the last time you genuinely thought about God? No, I'm not talking about screaming, "Oh God," during some chaotic Friday night groove when someone faints from being drunk or when your mom's about to whack you with a slipper back in the day. I mean actually thought about God, His place in your life, your decisions, and your future. Because let me tell you something, it looks like the South African youth have straight up ghosted God, left Him on red, and then replaced Him with TikTok trends and 14-year-old girls twerking on Instagram and the soft life dreams. And now we are spiraling into chaos because of that. Let me be real here. Without God, there is no foundation. None. Society falls apart like that pap you didn't stir properly. It's a happy mess. God is the difference between structure and anarchy, morality and lawlessness. And guess what? We've decided to build this generation without Him. And now we're out here wondering why everything is crumbling like Joburg's pothole-filled roads. Back in the day, like your parents' generation, grandparents, great-grandparents, God was the center of everything. Ask your gogo. She'll tell you her culture. Whether you were Zulu, Xhosa, Sotho, Afrikaans, sign language, you knew what was right and what was wrong because the Bible or your faith in general made it clear. But today, oh please, morality is treated like it's optional, like those extra toppings you can get on your Steers burger. Now you have 16-year-old girls with jeans tighter than our country's GDP saying things like, "Oh, I don't pray," or "Oh, I just don't believe in God." Despicable. Without God, people have no idea what's right and what's wrong. We've normalized cheating, stealing, and even disrespecting our parents because I'm just living my truth, young Tola. Really, living your truth. God gave you a universal truth, and instead of holding on to that, you've decided to swap it out for Instagram Reels, OnlyFans, and fake motivational quotes that will get you nowhere in life. The violence. And let's talk about how we've turned immorality into content. Everything's a joke now, eh? If someone's caught stealing, we'll slap a crime is hectic, hey, caption on it, share it on Twitter, which is now called X, and move on. Corruption, oh, that's just a South African thing. There's no shame, there's no guilt, and there's no accountability. Because without God, we are not anchored to anything. It's like we've all become cultural nomads wandering aimlessly in a desert of nonsense. You know what South Africans worship now? Did you guess it? Wrong. It's groove. That's right. Groove is the new God. You think I'm lying? Go to your nearest nightclub on a Saturday night and tell me I'm wrong. Actually, it's Friday today. Go and check. Because instead of praying for blessings on a Sunday morning, most people are out there having babalas and recovering from hangovers and trying to figure out where they left their shoes. Groove has replaced God as the central focus of our lives. It's no longer about building communities, supporting one another, Ubuntu, or honoring something greater than ourselves. No, now it's about who popped the most bottles, who drank the most savannas, who wore the most expensive outfit, and who can outdo everyone else in this toxic game of flex culture. Here's the funny part. Groove will drain you emotionally, physically, and financially. But we keep going back to it like it's some toxic ex we just can't leave. And then when everything goes south, we start praying, "Oh God, please bless me. I promise I will change." Really? You ignored Him all week, but now that you're broke and tired, you suddenly remember His name. Let's not even get started on social media. We've replaced God with influencers. You've got people out there worshipping TikTok stars and YouTubers like they are the second coming of Christ. Oh my gosh, did you see what she posted? #goals, period. Meanwhile, these influencers don't even care about you. They couldn't care less if you had a heart attack and fell down right now. They're selling you dreams while they live off your likes and your comments. Social media has brainwashed us into thinking that materialism is the ultimate goal. God tells us to be humble, but Instagram tells us to show off. God teaches us generosity, but TikTok teaches us to gatekeep. And guess which one we choose? Spoiler alert, it wasn't God. When a society loses God, it loses something very important, its soul. And we're seeing that right now in South Africa. Crime is out of control. Don't even get me started on gender-based violence because that is a pandemic on its own. Corruption runs so deep that we've now stopped being shocked by it. You know things are bad when politicians steal millions and all we say is, "Eish, that's South Africa for you." When you lose God, you lose accountability. You lose empathy. You lose hope. And then you wonder why life feels so empty. Why there is this constant sense of anxiety and despair hovering over everything you do. It's because you've disconnected yourself from the one source of real peace and purpose, the reason why you're on this earth anyway. Let's talk about morality for a second. Have you noticed how we started glorifying immorality? Cheating is no longer frowned upon. It's now a storyline for your Instagram stories to get more likes and views. Scamming people is celebrated as hustling. And lying, everyone does that now, right? The youth have lost all sense of decency. Instead of aspiring to be good people, we aspire to be viral. We're out here chasing clout like it's currency, selling our dignity for likes and retweets. And then we wonder why our lives feel so meaningless. Newsflash, you don't replace God with temporary validation and expect to be fulfilled. Let's address the elephant in the room here, the breakdown of the family unit. Back when God was at the center of our lives, families were strong. Parents taught their kids values, discipline, and respect. But now, parents are too busy trying to act like their kids' friends, and kids are out here raising themselves with help from YouTube tutorials. Without God, families fall apart. And when families fall apart, societies fall apart. It's a domino effect. If you want to fix this country, you need to start at home. And that means bringing God back into your homes. Look, I'm not saying it's easy. I'm not saying it's hard to reconnect. It's hard to reconnect with God in a world designed to keep you distracted from Him. But if you want your life to have more meaning, if you want to feel a sense of peace and purpose, then you have to make the effort. Start small. Pray every day. In the morning when you wake up, when you're going to sleep, just 5 minutes. Read a verse from the Bible, from the Quran if you're a Muslim. Reflect on your actions and decisions. And most importantly, surround yourself with people who lift you up, not drag you down. Because here's the truth. Without God, you are nothing. He's the foundation of everything good in this world. And until you recognize that, you will keep stumbling around in the darkness of load shedding, wondering why life feels so empty. Let me hit you with the hard truth. Right out of the gate, South Africa's youth have traded God for vibes. That's it. No better way to say it. God didn't get lost. He didn't leave us like some deadbeat dad. We kicked him out. We, the youth of South Africa, decided we don't need him. We told him in the face, I don't need you, get out of my life. And now we are here, standing on the rubble of a collapsing society, wondering why everything feels so hollow and why everything is going so bad. Spoiler alert, it's because the one thing that gave life meaning, the one thing that could have saved us, we threw away like a McDonald's receipt. Let's dig even deeper into this mess, shall we? Because if the first part of this video didn't slap you back into reality, sit tight because this part is about to shake you like load-shedding dinner prep. Let me tell you something. Tell me something. When did money become our God? And don't act brand new. You know it's true. Money is the youth's new religion, and hustling is the new form of prayer. These days, people are willing to do absolutely anything to get rich. Anything. Lie, cheat, steal, you name it. Eddie Guerrero style. Because we're all about the money. We're worthless now, aren't we? Because here's where it gets ironic. God warned us about this. For the love of money is the root of all evil. But instead of listening, we tattooed secure the bag on our foreheads and went on a mission to sell our souls to society, and as a result, a society where people will scam their own families, backstab their best friends, sacrifice their parents, and ruin their reputations, all for a quick buck. Think about it. Half the headlines you will see these days are about fraud, corruption, trafficking, money laundering, and you know what's sad? We, the youth, don't even care anymore because we've normalized it. It's just another hustle to us. We'd rather chase material wealth than moral integrity. And that's exactly why we are spiritually bankrupt. Here's another thing that killed our connection with God. We've become addicted to instant gratification. Look at the world around you. Everything is designed to give you what you want right now. Hungry? Uber Eats. Bored? TikTok. Lonely? Swipe right. God didn't work like that. God doesn't work like that. Faith requires patience, discipline, and trust. But we don't have time for that, do we? No, because we're just too busy chasing quick fixes and temporary pleasures and scamming everyone else. We want everything now. And if it doesn't come immediately, we throw a tantrum and move on like Karens. But here's the catch. Instant gratification is like junk food. It might satisfy you for a moment, but it leaves you feeling empty in the long run. Real fulfillment, the kind that comes from a relationship with God, takes time and effort. But because we are so addicted to the fast life, we've abandoned Him in favor of short-term thrills. Let's be real. Some of the blame lies with the older generations. Religion, for many of us, was presented as a set of rules rather than a relationship with God. It was all about don't do this and don't do that, and if you messed up, you were going straight to hell. But here's the thing, faith isn't supposed to be about fear. You shouldn't believe in God because you're scared to go to hell. It's about your love for God, hope, and redemption. But unfortunately, many of us grew up associating with God about But unfortunately, many of us grew up associating with God. But unfortunately, many of us grew up associating God with judgment rather than grace. And when you're constantly told that you're not good enough, when you're constantly told that you're not praying enough, you'll eventually give up. So what did we do? We walked away from God because we felt like we could never measure up. We rejected faith because it was presented as a prison rather than a source of freedom. And now we are out here lost and confused because we didn't realize that God was never the problem. It was the way he was presented to us. Let's talk about the elephant in the room, secularism. We live in a world that's becoming increasingly hostile to faith. Religion is seen as outdated, irrelevant, and even oppressive. If you mention God in certain spaces, you're immediately labeled as ignorant or brainwashed. The media, the education system, and even some of our peers have convinced us that we don't need God. Even our textbooks, they tell us that science has all the answers, that morality is subjective, and that we can create our own meaning in life. But here's the problem with all of that. Secularism strips life of a deeper purpose. Without God, life becomes a game of survival. There is no higher calling, there is no purpose, there is no eternal significance. It's just sleep, grind until you die. And let's be honest, that's a pretty depressing way to live. But instead of questioning it, we embraced it because it's easier to conform to the world than to stand up for our faith. Ask all the saints who died for their faith. Saint Paul, whose head was chopped off by the Romans when he defended our Lord Jesus Christ. Saint Stephen, the first martyr, who was stoned to death. Saint Philomena, I can name so much more. Here's another hard truth. Even the youth who claim to believe in God aren't living like it. You know how I know? You've got people posting Bible verses in the morning and then scamming their neighbors in the afternoon. Faith has become a fashion statement, a box to tick off on your social media bio rather than a way of life. But here's the thing, faith without action is dead. You can't claim to believe in God and then live a life that contradicts everything he stands for. And yet that's exactly what many of us are doing. We've turned God into a part-time gig, something we only think about when it's convenient for us. South Africa's youth are drowning in escapism, whether it's binge watching Netflix, playing video games for hours on end, or getting lost in the world of social media. We are now constantly trying to distract ourselves from reality. And why wouldn't we? Reality sucks without God. But here's the thing, escapism doesn't solve your problems. It just numbs you to them. And while you're busy escaping, your spiritual life is dying a very slow and silent death. Because instead of turning to God for comfort and guidance, you're turning to temporary distractions, zodwa wabantu, which leaves you empty. Back in the day, faith was a communal thing. People went to church together. Your neighbor went to church. You went to church. You prayed together. You laughed together. You supported each other. You donated for the poor at church. We've now become so isolated that we don't even know our neighbors' names now. Without community, faith struggles to survive. You need people to hold you accountable, to encourage you, and to remind you of what really matters. But because we've abandoned our communities, because we now isolate ourselves so much, we've also abandoned the one thing that's very important, God. Let's be honest, it's not cool to believe in God anymore. If you're open about your faith like me, people will look at you like some kind of weirdo. And because we're so obsessed with fitting in, we'd rather abandon our beliefs than risk being judged, am I right? But here's the thing, true faith requires courage. It means standing up for what you believe in, even when it's unpopular. And until you find that courage, you'll continue to drift further and further away from God. That is the harsh truth. Where are the faith-based role models for the youth? Who's out here showing us that you can believe in God and still be successful, confident, and relatable? The truth is, most of our so-called influencers are too busy chasing clout to care about faith. And because we don't have anyone to look up to, we end up thinking that faith isn't worth pursuing. But here's the good news. It's not too late. It's never too late. We may have lost our way, but you can still find your way back. Because God hasn't given up on you, and He never will, because you're literally His creation. If you want to save this generation, you need to start by connecting with God. It won't be easy. It won't happen overnight, but it's possible. And it starts with who? It starts with you. Yes. So what are you waiting for? Because the time to act is now. Because the longer you wait, the further you drift and the harder it will become for you to find your way back. Don't let that happen. Don't let God become a distant memory. Choose Him today and every day of your life. If you're still sitting there and thinking, why does this even matter? Why should I even care if the youth has lost God? Let me break it down for you. The collapse of morality, purpose, and sanity isn't random. It's a direct result of kicking God out of our lives. And if you think we've hit rock bottom, I've got news for you. We are still free falling, because what I'm about to say could get you angry and want to click off this video. I'm gonna stop playing nice now, the gloves are off. I also have to mention this reason because it's probably the main yet somehow most ignored problem. Social media is the God for the youth. Summer Sambit said social media is the new God of the youth. TikTok, YouTube, these platforms aren't just apps anymore. They are full-blown religions. Think about it. You wake up and the first thing you do is scroll. Before you eat, you post. Before you sleep, you check your likes. Sound familiar? Here's the crazy part. Influencers are the new preachers. The youth are taking life advice from people whose only qualification is that they look good in a selfie. They'll preach hustle culture, fake positivity, and superficial success while hiding their own brokenness. And we eat it up because it's easier to double tap a post than to pray and kneel down. The irony is insane. We complain that God isn't relevant or modern, but we'll worship a teenager who's doing a TikTok dance ceiling challenge. Social media has replaced the church as the place we go to for answers, validation, and a sense of belonging. Tell me if I'm telling lies, but let me tell you something. Social media is a hollow God. It promises the world, but delivers emptiness. Now, the next reason I'm going to give you is a killer, because somewhere along the line, we started treating happiness like it's the only thing that matters in life. Do whatever makes you happy has become the mantra of this generation. And at first glance, it sounds great. But let's unpack it for a second. What if the thing that makes you happy is hurting someone else? What if it's destroying your future? What if your short-term happiness is leading you down a path of long-term regret? Because here's the harsh truth. Happiness isn't the goal of life. Fulfillment is. Purpose is. And guess what? Those things come from who? From God, not from indulging in whatever feels good in the moment and watching La Sizwe. Chasing happiness above all else, you create a society where selfishness is celebrated and accountability is ignored. Let's talk about cancel culture, shall we, while we're at it? Because the youth love it. They'll cancel anyone and everyone at the drop of a hat. Said something problematic 10 years ago? Cancelled. Made a mistake? Cancelled. Disagreed with popular opinion? Cancelled. Someone says, I don't like these Summer Sambit anymore? Cancelled. Cancel culture is proof that we've lost God because it's the exact opposite of what He teaches. God is about forgiveness, redemption, and second chances. Cancel culture is about judgment, punishment, and permanent exile. What's even worse is that cancel culture doesn't fix anything. It doesn't encourage growth or change. It just creates fear. People are so scared of being cancelled now, they stop being honest. And without honesty, there's no progress. There's a growing trend among the youth where they claim to believe in nothing. No God, no afterlife, no purpose, just nothing. And let me tell you, this nihilistic worldview is a dead end. If you believe in nothing, then what's stopping you from doing whatever the hell you want? Why not lie, cheat, or steal, or even kill if there's no ultimate consequence? Atheistic nihilism removes all accountability. And without accountability, society collapses. God gives life meaning. He gives you a reason to strive for something greater than yourself. Take that away, and you're left with nothing but a generation that's lost, hopeless, wearing short skirts, crop tops, dangerously self-centered, and most importantly, wearing fishnets for clothes. Let's talk about this obsession with being independent. The youth have taken it to toxic levels. I don't need anyone. I don't need family. I don't need God. We romanticize the idea of being a lone wolf. And let's be real. No one does it alone. This whole I'm my own God mentality is not only ignorant, but also delusional. Humans are inherently dependent beings. We need connection, we need guidance, and most importantly, we need God. But toxic independence has convinced us that asking for help is a sign of weakness. And as a result, we are more isolated and lonelier than ever before in human history. Here's a controversial one. We've redefined morality to fit our own desires. Instead of living by God's standards, we've created our own. And surprise, surprise, it's a disaster. These days, right and wrong are subjective. What's right for me might be wrong for you, and vice versa. Sounds progressive, right? It's wrong. Wrong. Without a universal standard of morality, chaos reigns. God's commandments weren't random rules to restrict us. They were a blueprint for a functioning society. But by throwing them out, we've created a moral free-for-all where anything goes. Real life Fortnite, Baba. And trust me, that's not freedom. It's anarchy. Respect is dead, and we killed it. These days, the youth don't respect their parents, their teachers, or even themselves. And you know what's even worse? We don't respect God. Respect isn't just about being polite. It's about recognizing the value of something greater than yourself. Yamtol. When you lose respect, you lose humility. And when you lose humility, you lose God. Think about it. These days we mock tradition, we laugh at wisdom, and we dismiss anyone who tries to guide us. And then we wonder why we're so lost as youth. Technology is amazing, but let's be honest, it's also a spiritual killer. We are so plugged in that we've become disconnected from everything that matters. When was the last time you sat in silence and reflected on your life? When was the last time you prayed without being distracted by notifications? Technology has consumed us and it's pushed God to the sidelines. Let's be real. Faith requires vulnerability. It requires admiring that you're not in control, that you're not perfect, and that you need help. But now we live in a society that hates vulnerability. We've been taught to hide our weaknesses, to put on a brave face, and then to act like we've got it all together. But that's not strength, that's pride. And pride is the enemy of faith. So where do we go from here? How do we, the youth of South Africa, find our way back to God? Well, it starts with humility. We need to admit that we've messed up. You need to admit that you've lost your way and that you need help. It starts with community. You need to surround yourself with people who will lift you up rather than drag you down. And most importantly, it starts with God. God hasn't abandoned you. You've abandoned him. But the beautiful thing about God is that he is always waiting with open arms. The question is, are you ready to return? Because if you don't, the chaos you're experiencing now is just the beginning. The choice is yours, and don't make the wrong one. So South Africa, it's time to wake up. It's time to stop running from God and start running toward him. Because if you don't, you're not just losing God, you're losing yourself.